Chicago assembly plant because of the computer chip shortage.
A lot of members already know that there's discussion about it and aren't super concerned because there's protections and benefits for them. But as always, they're going to want to know as much as possible.
May 17th, 2025, a date that'll go down in history, but not for the reasons Ford wanted. The company that once symbolized the American dream dropped a bombshell: multiple assembly lines, including 2 iconic plants in Chicago and Michigan, shutting down indefinitely, nearly 9,000 workers gone in an instant. The Midwest is reeling, and the ripple effects are only beginning. But Ford isn't blaming China or supply chains or even a bad economy. They're pointing straight to Washington. Trump's 25% tariffs on imported cars and parts are hitting harder than anyone expected, and Ford's taking a brutal $1.5 billion loss because of it. The promise was America first, but instead of factories roaring back to life, we're watching them go dark. And when confronted, Trump's response was ice cold. They should have brought production home sooner. So what does that mean for the workers left in the dust? For the families who bet their livelihoods on the American auto industry? This isn't just about cars, but whether the American dream is still alive. Let's break it down. When Donald Trump launched his 2024 campaign, he promised a return to industrial strength with bold declarations and economic policies designed to put American workers first. At the center of that plan was a sweeping 25% tariff on all imported cars and automotive components, targeting even long-standing allies like Canada, Mexico, Japan, and South Korea. The intent was clear: to shield American jobs and reduce reliance on foreign manufacturing. But within months of implementation, the cracks began to show. Ford Motor Company, long considered a symbol of American automotive power, projected a staggering $1.5 billion loss for 2025, not from foreign competition, not from overseas instability, but directly from the sharp rise in manufacturing costs triggered by the tariff. Ford's first quarter report for 2025 exposed the full extent of the damage. Prices for imported parts, batteries, sensors, and high-tech chips used in electric vehicles spiked between 18% and 32%. These components, critical to Ford's growing EV lineup, couldn't be replaced easily. Over decades, Ford had carefully built a supply chain that stretched across North America, connecting factories in Ontario and Monterey with plants in Michigan and Illinois. Nearly half of a vehicle assembled in the U.S. relied on those parts. Once the tariffs hit, that system fell into chaos. Costs rose sharply, schedules broke down, and factories ground to a halt. In May, Ford took a step that rattled the auto world. It announced the closure of 2 major facilities, one in Chicago and another in Flat Rock, Michigan. Over 3,400 workers were suddenly without jobs. By the end of that same month, the company had laid off nearly 9,000 employees across the country, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Layoffs in auto manufacturing had jumped by 12.5% year-over-year, steepest climb since the COVID-19 crisis. What began as a policy meant to revive American manufacturing was now dismantling it from the inside. Ford's CEO, Jim Farley, didn't mince words in an interview. With CNBC, he made it clear that building electric vehicles in the U.S. using domestic materials wasn't economically viable under current conditions. U.S.-made aluminum and steel cost nearly twice as much as imports. Farley warned that instead of helping the industry grow, the tariffs were squeezing it from both sides, skyrocketing expenses while choking off parts vital to production. Ford, like other car makers, was being forced to stall or abandon investment plans because cost projections could no longer be trusted in such a volatile environment.
What happens when America's iconic auto industry faces a crisis, not from overseas rivals, but from its own government? The shockwaves from this trade battle are shaking Detroit to its core. It started quietly, just murmurs behind factory walls in Detroit. But soon the whispers turned into a roar that echoed through the heart of American manufacturing. The Ford Motor Company, a towering emblem of American grit and industry, faced a blow nobody saw coming. Factories shut down, assembly lines froze, and thousands of workers were sent home. The culprit? Not a foreign competitor, but tariffs imposed right here in Washington. Before we dive deeper, smash that like button, to help us reach more viewers and support the channel. On May 17th, Ford stunned the nation. Several of its historic American assembly plants went silent. The Chicago facility where thousands of Ford Explorers and Lincoln Aviators once rolled off the line, and Michigan's plant that made Broncos and Rangers all came to a halt. Workers were told to go home and wait, with no clear return date. The cause behind this shutdown was tariffs, not protective ones designed to bring jobs back, but punitive taxes that ended up crushing American factories. President Trump's trade policy slapped a sweeping 25% tax on imported parts and vehicles, aimed at China and Mexico. But instead, it struck at the heart of U.S. production. Ford forecasted a staggering $1.5 billion hit in earnings for 2025. An unprecedented financial blow, even for a giant like Ford. This was only the beginning. Across the Midwest, the fallout spread. General Motors scrambled to adjust production, cutting hundreds of jobs while quietly moving some truck assembly back to Indiana. Stellantis, Chrysler and Dodge's parent company, idled plants in Canada and Mexico, but the pain quickly reached Michigan and Indiana, where 900 workers lost their jobs overnight. Ford fought back, raising prices on the Mustang, Mach-E, Maverick, and Bronco Sport, all built in Mexico, by nearly $2,000 each to offset the tariffs. But customers felt the pinch, dealerships struggled, and Ford's efforts weren't enough. Before we move on, don't forget to subscribe to support this channel. Behind closed doors, Ford executives warned more cuts were coming. Tariffs increased costs across the board, from steel to electronics. The Lincoln Nautilus, imported from China, became too expensive to sell competitively, forcing Ford to stop exporting to China altogether. The trade war was no longer a theoretical threat, it was a harsh reality. When reporters pressed President Trump on Ford's crisis, he dismissed it as expected, doubling down that production should have returned to the U.S. years ago. "These tariffs are about America first," he said. That statement sent chills through every auto executive's office. If Ford could fall and the president didn't flinch, who would be next? Signs of distress multiplied. Stellantis stopped SUV production in Mexico for a whole month. Parts stopped arriving, assembly lines stalled, morale tanked, and layoffs hit 5 stamping plants in the U.S. unions, long silent, began openly criticizing management. This wasn't just pressure, it was a fight for survival. GM's Fort Wayne plant, which builds Silverado and Sierra pickups, tried to push back by adding shifts and rehiring workers. Their goal? Build more trucks on U.S. soil and dodge tariffs. But the victory was temporary. Nissan canceled U.S. orders for SUVs built in Mexico. Toyota slowed deliveries, Honda hiked prices, and the storm kept gathering strength. Then came the customers. In April, new car prices jumped over 2.5% in a single month, the sharpest spike in years. Buyers rushed to lock in deals before prices climbed again, but dealership inventories thinned, deliveries slowed, and popular models vanished from lots. Ford tried a desperate move, offering employee pricing to all customers, usually a last resort, to keep sales alive as costs soared. But this was a stopgap, not a solution. Supply chains faltered at every turn. Parts from Mexico became 25% more expensive. Canadian-assembled cars faced border taxes, and components from China, including crucial chips and batteries, were slapped with duties up to 30%. The pressure squeezed manufacturers to the breaking point. Ford's CEO Jim Farley called it the fairest fight in decades, trying to sound optimistic. But behind the scenes, the company slashed forecasts and scrambled to explain to investors why a brand that builds nearly 80% of its vehicles in America was bleeding losses. Layoffs hit cities like Kokomo and Toledo, where workers spared during the last recession finally felt the cuts. Entire shifts vanished, factories paused, and communities reliant on those paychecks, the diners, grocery stores, repair shops, started feeling the strain. Governors called emergency meetings. Labor boards issued warnings about rising unemployment. Mayors pleaded with Washington for relief, but the tariffs stayed firm. Wall Street watched in shock. Auto stocks tumbled, suppliers' shares crashed, and analysts warned the industry could lose over 1 million sales this year if tariffs continued. Washington's message? No changes. The Trump administration insisted the pain was temporary, that factories would reopen and companies would bounce back. But inside the industry, no one was holding their breath. Ford reconsidered future product launches. GM reassigned engineers. Stellantis froze hiring. And that whisper behind factory doors grew into a roar. Is this what America First really means? The North American auto industry was once a seamless, well-oiled machine, stretching across 3 countries, thousands of suppliers, and producing tens of millions of vehicles annually. Now that system is breaking apart. Ford and GM can't simply move all production stateside overnight. These supply chains took decades to build and optimize. Undoing them is not only costly, but risky. Still, tariffs force companies to make decisions not about efficiency, but survival. Shift production here, pause shipments there, cancel orders, raise prices, hope for the best. Through it all, workers are caught in the crossfire, jobs gained in one state lost in another. It's a shell game, and the pieces are running out. The political divide widens. Trump says the trade war is worth it. Democrats say the cost is too high. And in the middle, the workers watching their paychecks shrink, their futures fade. What's next? Retaliation looms. China has already hit American cars with tariffs. Exports dry up. Overseas markets shift to Korean and European brands. American cars are becoming too expensive to sell, both abroad and maybe soon at home. Ford isn't gone, not yet. But after decades of being a pillar of American industry, it's staggering. And the workers who built this legacy, raised families on those wages, are left asking the question no one wants to answer. Was it worth it? If you found this story eye-opening, hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think is the future of America's auto industry? And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the stories shaping our world. Thanks for watching. See you next time.